Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston,
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
and this is the weekly pulse check. We're looking at hot news articles in the world of automation and AI and giving you our thoughts and opinions on those. We've got 6 today. Michael, you ready?
Now let's do it.
All right. First one is from the New York Times. It's titled, Trump Signs Executive Order Seeking Oversight of AI Models. You don't usually see news articles that say Trump and oversight or anything having to do with
But
regulations.
we do see a lot of Trump executive order. I think that one happens like every
That one you
three
do
times
see.
a day
That
or
one
so.
you do see. So literally for the last year and a half, this presidential administration has been more about deregulation, more about, letting things run free around AI. So this one did get everyone's attention when this executive order got announced. And it's interesting in terms of, kind of what it's trying to put in place and what constraints and what have you. Some are saying it's just, it's him saying he's doing something toward governance, but it's really not going far enough. So what did you think? Michael, tell us your thoughts.
So my thoughts are that this was precipitated on the mythos law, or not released. I guess a news release because
Yeah.
they haven't released mythos yet.
Mhm.
The fact that even the organization who created it was saying how powerful and dangerous it could be. I think you add that on top of the fact that people are already afraid of what AI could potentially do and all the things that are associated with it. That probably I would say that probably led to a more urgent need to have someone do something kind of thing. So the original order that was to be signed a month or so ago gave the government here in the United States a 90-day window to look into new models before they were released. And the assumption I have in my part is for the government or their cybersecurity experts to have some kind of insight as to what the models capable are of what they could be doing in terms of their data, how they were trained, etc. Now that order was scrapped, the 90-day order, and this one, which was signed, I wouldn't say in secret, but it was signed very quickly without a lot of fanfare, brought that down to 30 days. So instead of 90 days ahead of time, which a lot of the organizations who are building these frontier models said, listen, 90 days, that's a whole quarter. We're going to be behind
Right.
China if we have to do 90 days. And so this brought down to 30 days. So given that, especially with the pace that things are running right now, to have some part of the cybersecurity organizations within the United States government be able to be on notice to say, by the way, here's a new model that needs to be reviewed and you have 30 days to do it, seems like it's a good step, but I'm not really sure how much review they'll be able to do in 30 days unless they have a very large team working around the clock to support it, or they've got their own AI to poke and prod to see what kind of, I suppose, you could probably only guess what kind of AI the CIA has to be able to poke and prod these frontier models to understand what they're capable of or what they do. So again, 30 days seems like it's more reasonable, and it is definitely outside of the president's original, hey, let the kids play kind of mantra he started off with deregulation.
But probably the most significant thing is it's voluntary. It's
Yes.
still voluntary.
Yeah, it's voluntary,
this is-
sure. It's all voluntary,
This
Brad.
is-
We voluntarily pay
this-
taxes too if we don't want to go to jail. We voluntarily do that. So
Yeah, I mean, this is saying companies can voluntarily share their models within 30 days before they release it to the public. And so, yeah, the time frame's been reduced, but it's voluntary. It's not mandatory. But I think the biggest piece of this, or one of the more significant things about the executive order, is it establishes this cybersecurity infrastructure, this group, this clearinghouse,
right.
that is going to look at it from that standpoint. What does this do in terms of allowing hackers more accessibility into these frontier models? What does it do to companies that are using AI at scale? Is it going to make them more vulnerable in certain ways?
To empower the hackers, like with Mythos specifically, empower the hackers to be able to find things that perhaps had been hidden for a very long time.
So I do think that is a significant part of this. It's something we haven't seen, and hopefully that will turn into new. I'm not a fan of creating more government, but in this case, I think having a team that is doing this and that's their sole focus,
right?
I think that's great. I think that's something we desperately needed. So I applaud that. I think the other stuff is, we'll see how companies play along with that, but everything's about speed right now. So even waiting 30 days can mean the difference between winning and losing in the market. If you have something new and novel, and but hopefully they'll play along with this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, article number 2. Let's talk about Meta.
Speaking of oversight,
so Meta. This is from especially in the topic of oversight. So this is from the BBC. The article's titled "Meta Workers Can Opt Out of Being Tracked at Work, Only for half an hour at a time." So we talked about this item a couple weeks, 3 weeks ago, somewhere around there, when it came out that Meta was in fact tracking everything their employees are doing, every keystroke, every application they're pulling up, and their rationale. It was nothing about, we're trying to figure out what you do and how you do it because we're going to replace you with AI. That was not the narrative. Instead, it was about training their AI models. We want to learn from the cognitive power of our people. We want to replicate that in the way our models work, which makes sense. But most employees look at it as the former. They're suspicious. They feel like Big Brother is really looking over their shoulder. And so this article is interesting. They've made a little bit of a step back, maybe not far enough. But what did you think about their reaction to the employees' reaction to this tracking program?
Yeah, well, again, I think there's there's many ways to look at this. So first of all, nearly every employee signs some kind of acknowledgement that the IT resources that we use are not ours, and that the company has every right and obligation to be able to look at whatever we do during their time on their machines using their infrastructure. So we kind of already knew this was happening, but most organizations don't have the time or wherewithal to do much with that. However, when you have Meta training AI, now the AI is watching literally everything and training off of it. It changes things, right? So the understanding that these employees had where, I don't want to be watched, as you mentioned, it's not something I want to be doing, but you have that on top of the announced, I want to cut 8,000 workers this year. We've already laid off 2,000. So that means another 6,000 are yet to go for this year.
Yeah.
And we're going to be watching everything you do, but it's only for training though. It's not going to be watching for any other purpose than that. So, the small concession is, well, a half hour at a time. You can have your own time, a half hour, if you pause it for that half hour. So I can only imagine that what they're finding through this AI training is how people are trying to skirt the observation of the AI as part of the way that it's being trained now. Is how do I get away with not having my every keystroke watched and every screen grabbed? Because they're also mentioning too that for people who are working at home, remotely, etc., that this was consuming a considerable part of their bandwidth as this data was being collected. So there's a lot of stuff that comes down to how they're managing this whole process. So you understand kind of the concept they're going through. and I guess it's admirable that they're doing it on their own employees, that they truly do have control over in terms of the way they manage the data. The challenge is that this just isn't a good look for the organization, especially when you're looking at trying to build a culture of teamwork. And if you're not part of the group that it has some permanent exemption, whatever you're doing on your machine is literally being watched to train an AI, and who knows what else when it comes to understanding the fact that you're looking at another 6,000 people to be laid off from the organization this year. So it doesn't sit well, I think, from a culture standpoint. Again, data-wise, I understand where they're going from training their agents, but yeah, it's not a good look.
No. I think the employee reaction is interesting. The fact that they're pretty bold. They call it, the employees started putting up flyers and things in the lunchroom, and they're referring to this as the employee data extraction factory. So, which doesn't bode well in terms of employee support and excitement around this. So I think it's interesting that they pushed back, and Meta in turn responded, gave them these 30-minute windows when they can go offline. But Michael, to me it reminds me of the fact that when you work for a large, especially a publicly held company in the U.S., and you sign all your employee agreements, it's very clear that anything you do, anything you create, any new IP that you generate while you're under the employment of this company belongs to the company. It doesn't belong to you, right? You come in with nothing, you leave with nothing. It's just a fact of life. It's the way we operate in the US, at least. I'm sure outside the US as well.
I'm sure all of our French and British counterparts and German counterparts are laughing like, oh my gosh, really?
We don't have IP protection. So it is something that is governed the same way in other realms. I think this is just another example. Not all of us are seeing this level of tracking of every keystroke and what have you. And I'm sure if it happened to all of us, we'd all be uncomfortable to a degree, just like the Meta employee. But yeah, we'll have to see if this crops up in other big tech companies or companies outside of tech. We'll have to see.
Right.
Article number 3 is from Forbes. It's titled "Owning the Mind." Is that what Anthropic, OpenAI, and private equity are up to? So this is an article from Dr. John Sviokla. He's from GAI Insights, which is an advisory and an analyst firm focused on the AI sector. He's been on the podcast before, so we know Dr. Sviokla. And he asked a question that is really interesting. In this era, does private equity, do they need to stop trying to own capital and start trying to own cognition? I mean, that's a pretty deep question, but it has a lot of implications for how we think about this space that we're in. So tell me what you thought of the article. I thought it was a very interesting piece, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, as you say, Dr. Sviokla is very convincing in how he works through his thought process here, and I really appreciate it. So the idea behind it is these private equity firms now are seeing some significant interest by the frontier model firms. Both Anthropic and OpenAI have offered to guarantee returns for some of these firms to be able to embed their own engineers at these firms to create AI-powered workflows, which I thought was very interesting in two different ways. One is the fact that they're moving forward with a guarantee of return, albeit it's not necessarily the fantastic returns that we would expect, a 17.5% return over 5 years. Not bad as an annual return. But it's just not the, threefold, fourfold increases that we've been talking through in other ways. But what's interesting to me is that these engineers are now getting a firsthand look at actual use cases and grappling with them in a industry specific way. So
Mhm.
where most of these organizations have very deep LLM math understanding to be able to create and model these large language models, they're severely lacking in some of
Mhm.
the industry expertise. And moving into this kind of verticalization where they can drop engineers into these firms with their blessing. In other words, come here and help us. And in the meantime, as they're doing it, they're also being exposed to the real troubles or challenges. I think is a genius move by OpenAI and Anthropic, and one that I can foresee having some very strong implications as you move into the future, because now those engineers will likely bring back, document, and maintain a bunch of these verticalization components inside now these frontier model organizations to provide new ways for these particular agents to be able to act within those particular areas. So it's a very interesting way to support it, and I think we're going to see this kind of investment moving forward from other organizations who are trying to do something similar, maybe not with frontier models, but maybe as a different type of AI consulting model to support building agents that are actually smart agents.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I mean, private equity firms in general, I think, have been in a little bit of watch and see mode with regard to AI, and especially in their portfolio companies. So this to me is a sign they're finally bought in. They understand
Right.
that even in their portfolio companies, as unsophisticated as they may be, there's an opportunity to get in there, build some stuff that is AI centric, and get some return. So that's a positive sign. And so now Anthropic, is doing this with Goldman Sachs and Blackstone and others, and then OpenAI is also doing it with TPG, Brookfield, and Bain
Hmm.
Capital. We're going to see, I think, many more examples like this,
I
because
agree.
you also have the big consultancies. Their whole sector is being disrupted by AI. They're trying to kind of carve out what their space is going to be, and I think this is a really smart competitive play on their behalf. I think
Yeah.
to stay relevant and to get into this. Um, to me, probably the most powerful thing that Sviokla says in the article is that AI doesn't just automate tasks, it amplifies whatever cognitive capital a firm has accumulated.
Hmm.
And then he goes on to say, if companies have outsourced their thinking, which a lot of companies have done
Yeah.
or still doing, they're the ones that are going to lose in the AI era.
Yeah.
Because
And
companies that
we've
go
seen that
ahead.
too with not just even folks who've outsourced, but the fact that there's deeply ingrained expertise in
Hmm.
employees that have been around the organization for quite a long time. And that
Yeah.
expertise is slowly slipping away as people
Hmm.
leave to retire or go to another organization. And all that expertise goes with them. So taking this next step here of trying to
Yeah.
capture that expertise and really the expertise part of it for that particular vertical, that's where
Hmm.
the real value is. This is the secret
Hmm.
sauce that all these organizations have. So they're trying to do that. They're trying to capture that secret sauce in a bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Article number 4 is from Yahoo Finance. ChatGPT can now see your bank account. Is it worth the risk? So, Michael, OpenAI has given not your freebie users, but the
Hmm.
ChatGPT Pro users the ability to connect their bank accounts, their credit cards, their investment portfolios directly to a chatbot. And apparently 200 million people are already asking ChatGPT about money advice. So what do you think about this direct connection now that pro users can have to their financial information, their credit cards, all of that. What do you think this means?
So I would draw parallels back to the olden days. Remember when we were children? No, the internet was
Somehow I do, barely. Go ahead.
the internet was just starting to take this whole credit card thing where you can buy stuff online. And the question we would ask then is, Brad, do you feel comfortable putting your credit card in this site to buy something? And we always had this question, like, I don't know, I hope it's okay. I mean, I'm not sure. I think we're kind of at that point now where people are wondering, is it okay if I let ChatGPT understand my finances and understand what I'm doing? Or maybe I'm still a little leery about it because, what happens if they know, now this ChatGPT or any of these frontier models start, quote unquote, learning the behavior of how I spend my money, of how I save my money, where it's at, that kind of thing. And that metadata goes back to the banking institutions that they know I have connections to, et cetera. So what's happening with that? So taking a page out of the earlier story from Meta, the more data you give to these frontier models, the more scary it could be, right? So I think there's going to be a time and place where we're going to see this as being normalized. Right now, I think it's a little more shocking, but I think if we all knew what our cell phone carriers and our credit card companies know about us and our patterns and our habits right now, we would probably be just as shocked, right? And things that we don't think about it anymore. Of course, the Google Maps, when it tells me how to drive to a specific area, knows exactly where I am at all times and keeps that data in and helps other users to route on traffic and all this. So all this stuff is stuff that's we're kind of used to right now. So I think right now it's a little shocking. Do I want ChatGPT or any of these frontier models to have access to my financial records? But I think it's going to become more commonplace as soon as we can feel that the governance models associated with using that data are going to be to our standards.
Yeah, it's just fascinating, the combination here that we haven't seen before, behavioral data with what things you're asking about money. So not only what you're doing with money, but what you're asking about money. And now combined with what you have, your financial data. I mean, that's creating this new profile, this new risk profile that we haven't seen before. So that's I think potentially something that will have its own consequences. I think the banks are watching this. The banks are always told they're going away, every year or something comes up that, it was blockchain and all these things that were going to erode the power of the banks. But they are probably paying attention to this trend and how things are going down this path.
Well, I would imagine a lot of the metadata coming from this is going to be very valuable to the banking institutions, especially the ones we've connected to, because they say, well, what are my customers doing through this year that I don't necessarily have the full insight to across the board? And what are other banks doing to support this that I definitely don't have insight to because I only see the data from my customers?
I think the population that is probably feeling the most threatened is going to be the financial advisors, the people that feel the threat that AI model are now presenting, because everyone used to go see them and make an appointment and pay money to get advice, and now you can get it from 100 different models and compare and contrast it. And if you want, I'm not saying everyone does that, but it's just new territory that will have its own level of disruption. Probably one of the other things that's going to come into play though here is there's no regulation over the advice and what ChatGPT is providing here. It's unregulated, as opposed to advisors and banks and investment management companies. They are tightly regulated. Not so much here. So that's something that our legislators are also going to have to deal with at some point, you would think. Okay, moving on. This is the next article is from CNBC, It's titled Perplexity CEO Tells CNBC One Metric Will Determine Who Wins the AI Race. So Perplexity CEO Arvind Srinivas said that there is one metric that's going to determine the winners and set them apart from the losers. And it's not how big your model is. It's not how many data centers you have. It's not performance in terms of responding to queries. It's none of those things.
Nope.
It's not even revenue, which that's good because that would eliminate almost all the frontier
It
models.
certainly would.
So tell us what he said and what you think about it.
Well,
Michael.
the one that he identified, that which I have to say is a very good way of looking at it from reframing this, is that it's the most token value per watt per user. And so let's break that down. We all know that there's this ambiguous term that we started learning about when we first started using any kind of these frontier models or any kind of AI models. And there's this idea that we're burning tokens, the tokens that are in and the tokens that are out as the way that we are leveraging these AI models. And so a lot of tokens in and a lot of tokens out tends to be great because now I can ask it a lot of questions and they can provide a whole dump of information back to me. But that value of it, we got to find out what is the value that's coming back from that. Do I have to ask it many times? Okay, that's one aspect of it. Even if it's really valuable and comes back, the next part of it is their per watt. So as we've been talking, and we've heard this from numerous stories, is that power is becoming a huge issue with the way that these large language models operate. And even if they can provide a lot of value, it's like taking a supercomputer to, balance your checkbook. Can it do it?
Right.
Yes. And everybody says, hooray. But at what cost, right? Was it really worth it to do that? And that last part, is it worth it, is something that we really haven't had to answer all that much. It was like, of course it's worth it. I only spend $20 a month on this model, and of course it's worth it. The bigger challenge is that there's a huge subsidy that we just don't see. Because these companies are burning so much extra money, the investor money, that really we are not seeing yet. So the value part of it is something that we're not necessarily feeling the crunch for yet. We are starting to see it as we start doing other types of things. For example, one where we're seeing a lot more closely aligned with is video production, video generation, where a certain model can generate this a certain length of video at a certain quality, and there's a price attached to that on a per second basis. And so that's not tokens anymore, but there's a value, a dollar amount applied to the output that was provided. And now you take the last part of this, which is per user. Because if you had one user doing this and they did it occasionally, you wouldn't have an issue. But when you have hundreds of millions of users or billions of users, and they're pushing through hundreds or thousands of tokens per query, how many watts is that burning to be able to get that? Is the value really worth it there? So you bake all those things into this kind of calculation. And it's very interesting because the way the models are operated right now, they're not necessarily looking for that specific metric to be optimized. And I think there's a lot of things we can do from a hardware perspective, from an alignment perspective. We've talked about small language models that are better tuned, etc. These are things that we can leverage in ways that perhaps will help increase that metric.
Yeah, just bringing efficiency in as a core part of establishing competitive advantage and using that as part of this metric. I think that's really new and interesting and innovative. Perplexity goes on to say that they view themselves as being kind of the orchestrator to help companies achieve this efficiency and use models the right way and not not use a model that's bigger or consumes more tokens than you need to consume. That orchestration play is obviously something we're playing with as well, and we bring forward with our offering. So I do think I do think there's a need for it. I think that question is coming up a lot now about, yeah, we can do this with AI, but how many tokens does it consume? And can we do it in a more efficient way? And
Right.
that's where digital workers continue to have a value proposition, right? Because
Absolutely.
the digital workers can achieve certain activities, even in a deterministic manner, at a much lower cost, and will do it, do it the same way every time. They'll do it right, et cetera. So that's something that I think makes RPA continue to be valuable, whereas AI can achieve other parts of a workflow that are very non-deterministic. So I wholeheartedly agree with this. I think it's a fascinating metric, and I'm curious if we'll give it a go and try to work this into some of our own customer zero internal performance tracking. Maybe we'll chase after that and see where it goes.
Well, one of the quotes that he had in here, which I thought was very interesting, is that he's saying that perplexity is focused on creating a sustainable, durable advantage. And this is really primarily an orchestration problem. And I thought that's exactly what it is sending the right kind of work to the right kind of model or execution mode to get the best bang for the buck.
Anthropic just recently filed for their IPO. And so, Perplexity is behind them in terms of market value, whatever, but it's giving Perplexity, I think, a big boost as they're trying to stay in the game. So you always have to think about that, right? They're always making these big splashes with something behind it. There's something motivating it. So perhaps that's what's going on here. Perplexity trying to maintain their relevance, but I do think it's a great article. All right, the final article, sixth article, is from CNET. How to tell if Google Chrome secretly downloaded a 4 gigabyte AI model to your device. Wow, this one sends chills down your spine.
Talk about oversight again.
Just the title is enough. We could just talk about that. But yeah, so an AI privacy researcher discovered that Google Chrome has been secretly downloading a 4 gigabyte AI model onto users' devices, and they're doing it without asking, without notifying. And if you discover it and you delete it, they download it again. So this is a bit terrifying on one degree, and it raises all kinds of questions. So what's your take on this one, Michael?
I like this article for no other reason that it brings exposure to the platform issue. So we've talked about Apple for a long time and how Apple hasn't had a real good AI play, and they have such a large installed phone base and whatnot. Well, think about the Google Chrome install base across platforms. We're talking about PCs, your iPhone, my Google Pixel phone. These are all the things that everyone's got Google Chrome somewhere, I'm sure. And so seeing this happen at scale and behind the scenes as a upgrade makes you pause. Like, what are we doing with this here? Now, the idea behind it is the way this model works. It's a 4 gig model. So assuming you have enough space, it does a check to start with to make sure you have enough power to be able to run that. And then it installs Gemini Nano onto your device through Chrome to be able to leverage this. And the idea behind it is, at least from a phone perspective, so I'll go to my Google Pixel phone. It's there for detecting scam phone calls, writing text messages, summarizing recordings, and analyzing Pixel phone screenshots, which is like, okay, well, how much more invasive can you be than to do all those things? But what's interesting is that they're doing this to be able to, again, offload some of the functionality and give you additional functionality local into your phone. So I understand the concept behind it and why somebody might want this on there, but to do it secretly without having some kind of opt-in or some kind of toggle switch to say, yes, I actually want that on my phone. I thought that was very interesting. And that the last part of this article I thought was interesting. The quote is, Google has given us every reason not to trust them with a history spanning 2 decades of global privacy violations at massive scale. This just does not help their optics in any way by saying, oh, by the way, y'all have our model that just got downloaded onto your Google Chrome and is watching everything you do. Not that we know what it is. Actually, I have no idea what Google Chrome is doing in the background half the time, other than when I'm looking at the site, I really don't know what's happening behind the scenes. So it's kind of terrifying thinking that what could be happening.
Yeah, and there was another article that touched on this same topic, Cyber News article, and said that this is also consuming tokens, right? We just talked about that on the last story. So everything this Google Nano model is doing consumes tokens. Now, it may not be that many tokens, but they're pushing this out to billions of devices. The net effect of this is probably substantial in terms of token consumption and CO2 equivalent emissions that come from that.
Right.
So there's that aspect.
Well, if your phone is locally processing all these things, that means your battery's not going to last as long. You maybe the things that you're normally used to doing on your phone may now be slowed down because AI is doing something else with it.
So I'm just wondering why more people aren't freaking out about this and questioning what Google's
fine.
doing.
I trust Google with all of my data and everything they know about me. They would never do anything wrong.
They have the best interest at heart there. So I'm sure we can trust them. All right, folks. Well, that's all the time we have for the Pulse Check today. Remember, every week we publish another great podcast with a great guest. Be sure and check that out. Otherwise, we'll see you back here next time to talk about the news. That's all. Bye for now. Bye for now.